So, World Trigger is now back in anime form, and if you've already seen Season 2 Episode 1, or Episode 74 of the full World Trigger anime, then you'll already have noticed that they didn't waste any time at all on recapping the series or re-explaining the setting or characters, jumping straight into what would be the next arc of the manga. Where the last episode aired in 2016, and where what we're calling Season 1 wasn't so much a season as a continuous run, as was more typical of shonen shows at the time, and so had 73 episodes in it, you could definitely be forgiven for needing a bit of a refresher on this series, its setting, and what exactly is going on to be able to get into Season 2. So I'm here to give a brief recap of what you need to know. Equally, if you wanted to get into World Trigger starting from the new season and haven't had time to catch up on all of the existing episodes, then this should at least be enough information to allow you to follow the show until you've had a chance to get through the episodes and get the full story. Now, World Trigger as an anime series is based on the weekly World Trigger manga by Daisuke Ashihara. And the reason for its original anime run, which started in October 2014, coming to an end at episode 73, was that Ashihara had to put the manga on hiatus due to health issues. The anime got a bit of a strange ending there, which was intended to wrap things up enough that if the show never came back, it wouldn't be too unsatisfying, but which meant that a lot of the things that had been built up throughout the series never got paid off. Happily, Daisuke Ashihara recovered, and the manga started up again in late 2018. The return of the anime was announced for 2020, but was delayed for the same reason as just about every other anime due to release in 2020. But now, Season 2, which will run for a single cour throughout the winter 2021 anime season, has begun. And Season 3 has also already been confirmed. World Trigger is, to me, a hugely underrated sci-fi shonen series with a lot of interesting things going for it and some great characters. So I'm really happy that it's back. But yeah, where the last season ended abruptly, and Season 2 is kind of picking things up and carrying on with the next arc in the manga, as if there hasn't been a 4-year break, it's not the easiest thing to slip straight back into, especially for anime-only fans. So I wanted to give an overview of things in World Trigger to make it easier to enjoy the new content. This is by no means a recap of everything that's happened in the 73 episode series, or details of every character. I could make a video like that if people are interested, but this one is just a refresher on the setting and characters to help dive into the new season, rather than a big in-depth breakdown like that. So let's start with the setting, what the Border Defense Agency and the neighbours are, and the concepts of Trion soldiers, and triggers themselves. The setting of World Trigger is Mikado City, a Japanese city that has, for 4 years at the start of the story, been under regular attack from creatures from another world. These things come in through portals called gates, and they take the form of different types of monsters. At first, the people of Mikado City refer to them as neighbours, because they come from a neighbouring world. But as we learn more about them, it turns out that these monsters are actually called Trion soldiers, and are created and sent to our world by the actual neighbours, who are more like humans, and who are divided into different countries with wars going on between them. An important country to know about for the start of Season 2 is Aftercrater, which is the largest military state in the neighbour world, and whose people have horns, which are actually devices for drawing in Trion, and are embedded into their heads when they're born. Neighbours from Aftercrater refer to Earth as Medan, which is why in the new episode, the neighbour characters kept referring to Medan when talking about their plans. The people of Mikado City are protected from the regular invasions by an organisation called the Border Defense Agency, usually just called Border, who are able to use a kind of technology called triggers that originally came from the neighbour world. Triggers allow people to transform into what's called a Trion body, which allows them to endure damage and gain increased combat abilities. But how powerful the transformation is depends on how much Trion, an invisible gland in the user's body, produces. Another capability that's important to note is that B-class and above agents are equipped with triggers that allow the user to bail out of a fight, deactivating their Trion body and transporting their physical body back to border headquarters or another previously selected location. Triggers themselves come in all different forms, which allow their users to fulfill different roles from a combat perspective, but there are also the highly esteemed black triggers. These are extremely powerful and very rare, and the might of a potential opponent in warfare is usually measured by how many black trigger users the country or unit has. The reason why black triggers are so special is that they're created as the legacy of very powerful Trion users when they pour all of their Trion into an object, sacrificing their lives in the process. They can only be used by someone who has an affinity with the black trigger itself, a limitation that normal triggers don't have, and their capabilities are a strong reflection of the person who made them. Being orders of magnitude stronger than normal triggers, black triggers and the allegiances of the people who hold them are very important in the politics and strategies of the neighbour countries, and also of Border. Some background for Border. Border quickly established the huge fortress that they use as their base overlooking Mikado City after the attacks first started happening. It seems to the people of the city that they'd been expecting the neighbours to make an appearance and had already trained themselves and formed their organisation to counter it. Border are doing such a good job of keeping the city safe that when the story begins, 4 years after the first attacks, most people have chosen to stay in the city, and normal life pretty much continues, with some of the most well-known Border agents looked up to as heroes and celebrities by the city's population. But Border is not a monolithic organisation where everybody agrees about everything, and there are really 3 different positions that different people within Border take when it comes to the neighbours, and these affect which Border leadership individual Border agents tend to follow and which fighting units they join. One group, which includes people who have actually visited the neighbour world before, is very pro-neighbour. While of course they still fight against the Trion soldiers and other attacks from the neighbour world, they know that the neighbours are not universally enemies of the Earth and want to form positive relationships with the neighbour world. This is the group that the main characters in World Trigger come to belong to. Opposing them is a group who basically hate all neighbours and are not open to the idea of negotiating with them at all. Then, thirdly, there are people who take the position that while there may be good and bad neighbours, what's most important is protecting the people of Mikado City from the attacks coming in through the gates, rather than relations with the other world as a whole. Within Border, agents have ranks and work in units, with S-Class being the highest rank and C-Class being basically trainee level. C-Class agents are only allowed to carry training triggers and are not allowed to use them outside of training. They also don't have the bailout capacity that full-fledged Border agents and personnel have. The technology for this was deemed too expensive to equip outside of for people expected to be in combat. The majority of Border agents, and most of the people we encounter in World Trigger, are B-rank agents, and the arc beginning at the start of Season 2 takes place during a tournament between B-rank agents who are trying to raise their ranks in order to be selected for expeditions into the neighbour world. The rank battles are a long ongoing story within World Trigger, and there are both solo and team matches where different characters all have different things at stake, so it isn't your straightforward shonen tournament arc. There are also other things going on at the same time with the neighbours that will mean that, while the rank battles aren't resolved yet, they won't be the only important plotline in Seasons 2 and 3. Another concept to be aware of is side effects. Side effects are unique abilities that serve as extra senses, which some people have as a result of Trion. They range from extremely useful to mildly annoying for the people who have them, and the individual side effects of different characters can sometimes play into the strategies they use or give them interesting new options in battle. So that's the setting. Now for a quick recap of who the main characters are. There are 4 main characters: Osamu Mikano, Yuma Kuga, Chica Amatori, and Jin Yuichi, and they all end up belonging to a border branch called Tamakoma Branch, which is their affiliation at the start of Season 2. Strangely, they don't feature much in Season 2 Episode 1, but they will still be the main characters, so here is a brief recap about them. At the very start of World Trigger, we meet our first main character, 15-year-old Osamu Mikano, aka Megane-kun, owing to his glasses. He's a normal student who's also secretly a trainee border agent. The story begins when Osamu befriends a white-haired transfer student called Yuma Kuga, who everyone assumes is from another country, but who Osamu notices is sus, and who he quickly finds out is actually a neighbour. However, Yuma doesn't seem to mean the people of Japan any harm, and claims he's there because his father, who died, told him to go to Japan and make contact with border, as he had a friend who was a border agent. Yuma has a trigger, which we soon find out is a black trigger created by his father. He's a powerful fighter, and also has a special Trion soldier referred to as a chaperone that helps him out with things, including with communicating with his allies throughout the story. This chaperone is named Replica, and he takes different forms, but when he's properly out is a cute hovering robot thing. Another thing Yuma has going for him is a side effect that allows him to tell when people are lying. He usually reacts to this by saying, "You make up the stupidest lies" in conversation, whether he's prompting a friend to open up to him or confronting someone over a more serious lie. After defeating some bullies together, Osamu is persuaded that Yuma is probably a good guy, but his ignorance about Japan and his strange logic, which seems to come from the fact that he's always lived in what he says were war zones in the neighbour world, mean he keeps causing trouble. So Osamu promises to teach him about the rules associated with life in Japan. And speaking of rules, as a C-rank trainee at the start of the story, Osamu is not allowed to use his trigger outside of training. But of course, he ends up in situations where he has to, because the monsters start appearing outside of the designated areas that border technology has restricted the gates to, such as outside his school. Trion soldiers attack his school friends, including his childhood friend Chica Amatori, who we'll come to soon, and border agents are slow to respond due to the unexpected location. Osamu decides to try to fight, but he's too weak for the enemies, because Osamu doesn't have a very high level of Trion in his body, plus he's only using a training trigger. So Yuma uses his black trigger, transforms, and defeats the monsters. He gives Osamu the credit for this because he doesn't want people to find out he's a neighbour, and just when all of Osamu's classmates are praising him, a high-profile squad of border agents named the Arashiyama Squad after their leader arrive. This is one of several squads who are recurring characters in World Trigger. Arashiyama himself has no problem with Osamu having used his trigger because it saved his brother and sister, who both attend the same school. But his squad member, Kitora Ai, who seems to dislike Osamu being praised for what happened, believes Osamu should be punished. She comes to his school later to escort him to the border base, so a decision can be made about him, much to the delight of his classmates who see her as a celebrity, taking pictures of her, which she pretends to hate. Yuma tags along, following them as they walk to the base and discuss things, but then a new kind of Trion soldier appears in the sky, and this kind is designed to drop bombs. Kitora tries to fight it because Osamu can't transform again, having used up all of his Trion in the earlier fight. He instead goes to help the people trapped by rubble from the bombs. Yuma waits and, at Osamu's request, tries to help Kitora, even though he doesn't really like how she's been treating his new friend Osamu so far. He manages to help her defeat the Trion soldier by pulling it into a river before it can self-destruct, without her noticing it was him helping out. Kitora did, however, notice that something was giving her an assist. Now they get to the big border headquarters building that dominates the skyline of Mikado City, and Yuma leaves because only authorized people can get inside. And it's here we're introduced to another main character in the form of Jin Yuichi, aka the Power Elite. He's not only the top fighter, but is also revealed to have a side effect that allows him to see the future. We also find out in time that Jin is a black trigger user, and his trigger was created by his mentor, Soichi Mogami, one of the founders of Border, and a friend and rival to Yuma's father, Kuga Yugo. However, this black trigger, called the Fujin, is compatible with a lot of Border agents, and later on Jin agrees to hand it back over to Border for other people to be able to use in order to ensure Yuma's enlistment, where there were fears around Jin's Tamakoma branch having 2 black triggers. Jin manages to avoid both Osamu being fired for using his trigger and to prevent Border from capturing Yuma, after those in Border leadership who are opposed to all neighbours send squads after him on finding out about Yuma's neighbour status and the fact he has a black trigger. This is the very short version of how these 3 characters came together, and it results in Osamu and Yuma ending up becoming part of Tamakoma branch. Chica Amatori is the other main character, and she was introduced right at the start as Osamu's childhood friend. Chica starts off wanting to get to know Yuma because she has a couple of problems related to the neighbours. Firstly, she seems to attract the Trion soldiers, and secondly, her older brother, who was also friends with Osamu, and her best friend, both have been taken by the neighbours. She also has a side effect that allows her to sense the neighbours and their locations. As she discusses things with Yuma, he tells her that one of the reasons why neighbours attack the Earth is to find people with high levels of Trion, which they take back with them to use in their wars. He uses Replica to test how much Trion Chica has, and it is off the charts, unlike Osamu, whose Trion supply is pretty small for a Border agent. This is probably why the Trion soldiers are so drawn to Chica. He also tells her that her friend and brother are likely to still be alive in the neighbour world, which makes Chica determined to join Border and rise through the ranks so she can be chosen for an expedition to the neighbour world where she can look for them. We also learn that Osamu's reason for joining Border in the first place was to protect Chica, because he'd promised her older brother, who was Osamu's friend and tutor, that he would look after her if anything happened to him. Together, Osamu, Yuma and Chica form a unit within Jin's Tamakoma branch called Tamakoma 2nd, and they're trying to achieve A-rank status through the rank battles so that they can all go to the neighbour world. As of the start of Season 2, these rank battles are ongoing, but we also see that there's a plan by a group of neighbours to attack Border headquarters. I won't go into all of the side characters because there are a lot of Border agents and different units who are involved in the rank wars and will be involved in this storyline, and the show does usually remind you of their names and units when they appear on screen. But one key character you might have been struggling to remember, who seemed to be important in what's going on in Season 2 Episode 1, is Husei, the guy with the horns. As you might expect from both his horns and his actions in the episode, Husei is a neighbour, who is originally from Aftercrater, and he was left behind by his comrades after a thwarted attack on Mikado City. He was taken in by Jin, but is determined to get home, and this will likely be important in this current arc. So that's about it for this refresher course on World Trigger. I will also be doing a review of World Trigger Season 2 Episode 1 itself, and every episode in Season 2, so please consider subscribing and ring the bell if you're interested in World Trigger content. I mainly cover ReZero and Attack on Titan on my channel, and I make content about both the anime and source material for those, as well as doing deep dive analysis and theory type stuff about them. But with the winter 2021 anime season being so stacked, there were a couple of shows I'm really happy to see returning, but which I don't think will be getting all that much coverage due to just how many high profile shows there are, in the form of World Trigger and Log Horizon, so I'm going to be doing weekly videos about those too, because I think they deserve some love. Look out for the episode 74 review in the next couple of days, and feel free to discuss World Trigger as much as you want in the comments section. If you're a fan, let's try to keep the hype strong for World Trigger Season 2. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again very soon.